Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The doorbell hammered like someone leaning on it nonstop. I yanked the door open, ready to snap at a delivery guy. Two officers filled the doorway instead, hands resting near their belts. "My name is Mark, I'm 38, and that was the second my stomach flipped. One of them lifted his badge a little higher, just in case. The other scanned past my shoulder, already counting bodies behind me. My wife hovered near the hallway, gripping her phone with both hands. My stepson peered over the banister, eyes already shiny for effect. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk to you inside." The taller one kept his tone flat, like this was routine. I tried a small joke, asked if I was getting a ticket. No reaction, just that blank police face that makes you feel smaller. I stepped back and let them in because what else? Even now, writing this, I still hate that automatic obedience. My wife moved aside and almost bumped into me, avoiding contact. That tiny flinch hit harder than the badges in my doorway. The shorter officer asked where we could sit and talk privately. He said the word privately like it already meant something shameful. I led them to the living room, every step suddenly too loud. I could feel my stepson tracking us from the edge of the hall. "Your stepson reported something at school today." The tall one sat forward, hands clasped like some calm referee. My brain tried to jump ahead and failed, just white noise. All I managed was a confused, "What do you mean?" "He reported physical discipline that crossed a line." Physical discipline, that phrase sounded rehearsed and so damn official. They always start soft like that, like they're giving you a chance. I should have paid more attention to that gentle start. "Did you grab him, push him against a wall last night?" The question landed like a punch I did not see coming. I actually laughed once, a short, ugly sound that felt wrong. Both officers watched me like that laugh answered something important. I said no, then yes, then tried to correct myself. Because technically, I had put a hand on his shoulder. You know that thing where you steady a kid who's storming off? Try explaining that while two uniforms stare like a lie detector. The short one pulled out a notepad and wrote something slow. My wife shifted her weight and leaned against the doorway frame. She would not sit next to me, which said more than words. My stepson slipped further into the hall, just far enough to listen. "Sir, we need everyone separated for these conversations." That line snapped whatever normalcy we still pretended we had. One cop asked my wife to come with him to the kitchen. The other stayed planted across from me, blocking my view of them. The second they moved away from me, my stepson turned dramatic. He pressed the back of his hand under his eye like a movie. Big shaky breaths, shoulders hunched, the perfect wounded teen performance. I saw it, and I also saw that the officer clocked it. "Has there ever been any kind of physical altercation here?" He asked it like he already knew the answer and just needed confirmation. I told him we argued, sure, like every blended family on earth. I promised I had never hit the kid, and that word hung there. He asked if I ever grabbed his arms, blocked a doorway, raised my voice. I said yes to the doorway because lying felt worse in that moment. I described one screaming match where I stopped him from running outside. While I talked, the officer's eyes stayed on a spot over my shoulder. I turned and finally saw what held his attention in the hallway. A scuff patch in the drywall at shoulder height near the corner. Not huge, but visible enough to look like someone hit it hard. I had walked past that mark 100 times without caring. "How long has that been there?" His tone tightened just a little, and that tiny change rattled me. I told him I didn't know, which sounded weak even to me. Silence stretched long enough that I could hear my own pulse. In the kitchen, my wife started talking faster, voice rising and dropping. Every few seconds, my stepson added a sniff or a choked sound. I couldn't hear words, only the rhythm of them stacking against me. That was the first time I felt truly outnumbered in my own house. "Any witnesses to the argument last night?" The question stung because argument made it sound like a full-on brawl. I said it was homework and chores, just raised voices and slamming doors. He wrote that down anyway, like slamming doors proved something about me. He asked if I drank that night, if I took anything stronger. I said no, then made the mistake of adding I rarely drink. He asked how often rarely meant, and I realized every extra word hurt. It felt like being cross-examined by someone who never met me before. At one point I tried to stand up just to move. The officer's hand twitched toward his belt, just a tiny instinctive motion. He relaxed 1 second later, but I had already seen it. I sat back down slowly and kept my hands flat on my thighs. From the hallway, my stepson finally spoke louder, pushing his voice out. He grabbed me here, right here. It still hurts when I move. He exaggerated the words, still like an actor leaning into a line. My wife murmured something soft, and I envied how quickly she believed. The officer asked if I would mind them taking a quick look. I said yes too fast, then corrected to sure, no problem. We walked to the hall where my stepson stood hugging his own ribs. He would not look at me, which honestly helped his case a lot. Show us exactly where it happened. The taller cop stood between us, narrowing the space even more. My stepson pointed to the spot by the wall near that scuff. He lifted his shirt enough to show faint discoloration on his shoulder. I swear to this day I had never seen that mark before. He flinched when the officer leaned close, like the air alone hurt. Was it real? Was it makeup? Was it from something else entirely? Standing there, I realized it did not matter what I believed. They took photos of the wall and of his shoulder from angles. My wife watched with her arms folded tight across her chest. She finally met my eyes for half a second and looked away. That tiny dodge hit me harder than any spoken accusation could. Given the nature of the report, we have to involve child services. The officer's voice tried to sound calm, almost kind, which made it worse. He said someone from their office would contact us very soon. I heard contact us and translated it to investigate you on repeat. I kept insisting I never threw him, never hit him, never did that. The words started to feel cheap, just noise bouncing off their vests. They nodded politely the way people do when the story is already written. That was when I felt the first crack in the life I thought was solid. Before they left, they reminded my stepson he did the right thing speaking up. They told him if he ever felt unsafe, he should call immediately. I watched my own address written under the word unsafe on a form. It was like seeing my name printed on some quiet wanted poster. My wife walked them out while I stayed near the hallway dent. I traced the edge of it with one knuckle, trying to remember. Had I knocked something into it? Had he punched it? Had it always existed? That little patch of broken drywall suddenly felt like a loaded weapon. When the door finally shut, the house did not relax with it. My wife stayed by the window, watching their car idle at the curb. My stepson retreated upstairs, footsteps heavy enough to sound offended. I stood alone in the hallway, realizing a single story could erase everything. The next knock came before I finished my first coffee. It was sharp, 3 quick hits, no hesitation at all. My wife went rigid at the counter and did not move. I already knew this visit would not be a friendly one. A woman stood on the porch with a thin folder pressed tight. Badge on a lanyard, neutral face, shoes that meant long days. She asked for both of us in that careful, trained voice. Just hearing our names from her mouth made my chest tighten again. We sat around the table like strangers waiting for bad news. She opened the folder and lined up a few thin forms. "There's been a report involving your household," she started, very official. My wife folded her hands together so hard her knuckles shook. The woman looked at me first, then up toward the staircase. "Your stepson shared some concerns at school," she said, not accusing yet. She used words like safety plan and temporary arrangement and investigation. None of it sounded temporary from where I was sitting. My stepson drifted down halfway, hovering on the last few steps. He leaned against the rail and stared at the floor, perfect victim posture. The worker invited him to sit with a small tilt of her head. He stayed where he was, which somehow made him look even more fragile. "I'm going to speak with each of you alone," she went on. "That's to make sure everyone can talk without pressure." I knew that line came straight from a training manual somewhere. Did not stop it from prying under my skin like a hook. She took my stepson first into the living room and closed the doorway. Voices drifted back, low at first, then broken sniffles from him. Every time he raised his volume, my wife flinched at the table. I gripped my mug so hard my hand cramped around the handle. I caught one clear line through the wall and it felt like ice. He grabbed me right here and shoved me and I hit the wall. He added a sharp inhale like it hurt just to recall it. My wife pressed her palm over her mouth and stared at nothing. I wanted to yell through the doorway and tell him to stop. Tell him to remember that this was not some stupid prank. Instead, I stayed planted because any outburst would land like proof. That was the trap of it, any move looked wrong now. And it was my turn. The worker waited until I sat opposite. She kept her hands visible on the table, calm and practiced. "Walk me through last night from your point of view," she said. The phrase "your point of view" made me feel guilty before speaking. I described the shouting, the storming away, the part where I blocked him. I mentioned placing a hand on his shoulder, nothing more than that. As I talked, she wrote in short bursts, eyes flicking up often. Each pause felt like another small verdict dropped between us. "Did you ever strike him with your hand or any object?" Her voice stayed even, but my pulse jumped at the wording. I told her straight no, and that I would never do that. Answering so fast made me sound rehearsed even to my own ears. She moved on to alcohol, to stress, to whether things had escalated before. I heard myself using words like frustrated and overwhelmed, and raising my tone. Those terms never sound great when lined up neat on someone else's paper. Looking back, I wish I had just shut up after the basics. When she asked if I felt in control of my anger, I hesitated. Not because I hit anyone, but because I knew the honest answer matters. That small pause stretched out and her pen hovered over the page. I finally muttered that I lose patience but not control, which sounded flimsy. She thanked me and went to speak with my wife alone. I stayed standing in the hallway because sitting felt like weakness. My stepson lingered at the corner again, half hidden behind the wall. We locked eyes for a second and he looked away, almost smiling. "You happy now?" I asked, voice low so it would not carry. His chin lifted a little, like I had proven his whole point. "You shouldn't grab people when you're mad," he threw back, quiet and clipped. The confidence in his face scared me more than any bruised story. The worker called us both back into the kitchen for her decision. My wife took the chair closest to her, not to me. That tiny distance felt like miles, and I know how dramatic that sounds. Still, in that moment, I saw which way the tide leaned. Given the information today, we need to reduce immediate conflict in the home. She sorted her papers into 2 stacks and tapped them into alignment. "I'm recommending a short separation between you and your stepson during the review." I focused on the word recommending and heard this is already happening. My wife stared at the table and asked what that meant in practice. "It means Mark will reside elsewhere for now," the worker answered, very calm. She looked at me, waiting for a reaction like she was testing stability. I laughed once, no humor at all, just air leaving too fast. "So he gets the house and I get a motel?" I asked. The worker did not flinch, just confirmed that temporary housing would be on me. My wife whispered that it was only until things got cleared up. None of us knew then that cleared up would not feel like before. My stepson shifted his weight on the stairs, listening with open satisfaction. He did not even try to hide it now that the call went his way. If anyone noticed that shift in him, they did not show it. Maybe I only see it clearly now, replaying every tiny movement. The worker slid one form toward me, pointing at a line near the bottom. "This confirms you understand the plan and agree not to contact him alone." I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else's mess. My signature still ended up on that line, with a stupid shaking flourish. I grabbed a duffel from the closet and started stuffing clothes blindly. No folding, no order, just whatever my hands landed on first. My wife hovered nearby, offering nothing, not even a useless reassurance. The worker stayed within sight, making sure the safety plan stayed intact. On the staircase, my stepson watched like it was a show he paid for. He leaned on the rail, chewing his lip, eyes bright with vindication. "Guess you shouldn't have lost it, huh?" he muttered under his breath. I froze halfway through zipping the bag, fingers digging into the nylon. I wanted to explode right there and list every lie. Call him out in front of the worker, force a confession somehow. Instead, I inhaled hard enough that my chest hurt and looked away. Any outburst would have given him exactly the scene he wanted. At the front door, my wife finally spoke more than 2 words. "Where will you go?" she asked, voice thin and worn down. I shrugged because admitting I had no plan felt too raw. "Somewhere cheap," I managed, and watched the shame land on both of us. The worker reminded me again not to reach out directly to the kid. Any communication about him should go through your wife or our office. My own family was now something I needed permission to contact. That thought kept echoing as I stepped past the threshold. Outside, I noticed our neighbor pausing by their car, keys in hand. They gave a small, awkward wave, eyes flicking from me to the woe. "Arthur." They did not ask anything, but the question hung there anyway. I pictured the story forming before I even left the driveway. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel and just sat there. The house loomed in the mirror, front door still slightly ajar. Inside, the kid who accused me still had my spot at the table. I drove away only when I realized I could not stare anymore. Halfway to nowhere, my phone buzzed with a number from work. I almost ignored it, then remembered ignoring looks guilty later on. "Mark, we received a call regarding an ongoing investigation," HR began, controlled and distant. Just like that, the problem leaked out of my house and into everything. They asked if I could come in that afternoon to discuss next steps. I told them I was dealing with a family crisis and was displaced. The person on the line paused, then suggested a remote meeting instead. Their politeness felt less like support and more like careful legal distance. By the time I pulled into a cheap roadside place, my head throbbed. I checked in using a practice fake calm I did not feel. The room door shut behind me with a hollow echo that lingered. That was the first night I realized the accusation had its own address now. My work phone lit up on the motel nightstand. Company logo on the screen, unknown extension underneath, way too early. I watched it ring through once, hoping it would stop on its own. On the third buzz, I picked up, because ignoring them never ends well. "Mark, we need to discuss a serious matter regarding an allegation." The voice belonged to someone from HR, calm and polished and distant. They asked if I was available for a video meeting within the hour. I said yes while staring at the stained ceiling, already feeling cornered again. I balanced the laptop on the small table and joined the meeting. Two faces popped up, HR on one side, company counsel on the other. Both gave the same tight smile, the kind that means this is formal. They thanked me for joining from home, and I did not correct them. "We received a report involving a minor related to you." The attorney leaned closer to his camera, fingers steepled, eyes steady. "Under our policies, we are mandated to respond promptly and appropriately." Whenever someone says appropriately like that, they usually mean protect the brand. They asked if any authority had contacted me about conduct in my household. I confirmed there had been a visit and some follow-up interviews. I tried not to say too much because every extra detail felt dangerous. Even through a screen, you can feel when people start to categorize you. Is there any truth to the claim of physical harm? That was the first direct hit, no careful phrasing, just blunt impact. I answered no and forced myself to keep my tone even and slow. In reality, my heartbeat was sprinting, like it wanted to climb out. The HR rep asked if I had ever raised my voice at home. Once that door opened, every answer became a trap in my head. I admitted there had been shouting, just like every other family under pressure. Even as I said it, I knew the comparison would not help. They took turns explaining the company's stance on violence and legal investigations. Words like liability and reputational risk and best interest floated through the call. Those terms were never about me, they were about paperwork and headlines. That was the moment I understood how alone I actually stood here. "We are placing you on administrative leave with immediate effect." The attorney watched my reaction like he wanted to measure the damage. "No access to company systems until this matter is resolved externally." He might as well have reached through the screen and taken my ID. I almost argued, almost raised my voice about fairness and due process. I caught my own reflection in the dark laptop frame and shut it down. The worst thing I could do right then was sound heated. One note on a report that said agitated, and I'd be done. So I nodded and thanked them for letting me know, which felt insane. HR promised to send a follow-up email summarizing the conversation and decision. They wrapped the call with a polite offer to use employee assistance services. Cut off my income and then offer a wellness hotline. Cute combination. When the meeting ended, the room went too quiet too fast. I shoved the chair back harder than I meant to, and it scraped. Anger rose in a sharp wave, hot and stupid and ready to break things. I clenched both hands until my fingers ached and focused on breathing. Honestly, this is where I have to admit something about myself. I do run hot when I feel cornered, always have, and I hate it. In a private life, that looks like slamming a door a little too hard. In this situation, that same habit might as well be Exhibit A. My phone buzzed again with a number I did not recognize at all. For a second, I considered ignoring it and then thought of more reports. Is this Mark Cart? The man asked, voice brisk and practiced and older. He introduced himself as a defense attorney, referred by a coworker quietly. We met that afternoon in his cramped office above a strip mall. He studied me for a long second before gesturing toward the chair. You know why you're here, so let's not dance around it, he started. He opened a legal pad and clicked his pen once, eyes never leaving mine. Tell me exactly what they believe you did, not what you think happened. That phrasing hit harder than any accusation so far in this mess. I described the allegation in as few words as possible and then stopped. He waited, clearly used to people trying to talk themselves clean with extras. Do you lose your temper often? He asked it like he once played poker for rent money. I said I get frustrated, that I can be loud when pushed hard. The pen moved again, slow, like he had heard that line 1,000 times. Any previous incidents with this kid that someone might call physical? The room seemed to shrink around that question, narrow and unforgiving. I remembered blocking a doorway, grabbing a wrist, pushing past him in arguments. I admitted there had been contact during fights, nothing beyond stopping him leaving. He rubbed his jaw, thoughtful, then leaned back in his chair watching me. From where you're sitting, that sounds reasonable, he said, tone level and cool. From where a social worker sits, it sounds like escalation and control. Hearing it translated into their language made my throat feel suddenly dry. He asked if neighbors ever heard shouting or called in noise complaints. I thought about the nights with doors slamming and voices clashing through walls. It never seemed extreme inside the moment, just two stubborn people refusing to back down. Now I pictured someone next door hearing only volume and not context. If they knock on your neighbor's door, what story do they hear? That question landed like its own charge, heavier than anything in the file. I had no idea what anyone would say, which scared me more. You think you know how you come across until outsiders start writing reports. The attorney tapped his pen against the pad, picking his next words carefully. You need to understand how this looks when it's written down in bullets. He read out loud what he already had, each line worse than the last. Raised voice, blocked exits, grabbed arm, child now reports feeling unsafe. In every interview from now on, you stay calm. He spoke slowly, like he wanted the instruction drilled into my nerves. No raised tone, no sarcasm, no eye rolling, no sudden movements. He listed my worst habits like he'd known me for years. To be honest, I wanted to argue with him too. Tell him I was not some rage case, just a pissed off stepdad. But that would have proven his point right there in his office. So I swallowed it and let the silence stretch until my shoulders dropped. We'll push for full records, he went on, moving back into strategy. School notes, interviews, any photos taken in your home, everything. He told me to keep copies of every message from my wife and her son. No more verbal promises, no more casual agreements, everything documented. He also ordered me off social media like it was medication with side effects. No posts, no cryptic quotes, no venting about injustice to your feed. He had seen too many clients sink themselves with one dramatic late-night paragraph. I believed him because I knew exactly the kind of post I would write. Walking out of his office, I checked my phone for updates by reflex. There was a short text from my wife, nothing warm, just logistics. Caseworker wants to know if you'll sign release for school records. Even that tiny request felt loaded, like handing them keys to another room. I answered yes because refusing would look worse than anything they might find. That's the terrible part, you start choosing the least damaging option every time. Not the fair one, not the honest feeling one, just the one that bleeds slower. My choices shrank down to what looked best on a report. Back at the motel, I paced between the bed and the door. I replayed the attorney's warning about my tone over and over. Every memory of losing patience with that kid now looked different in my head. He knew exactly which snapshots to pull and show strangers. In the room next door, someone started yelling at a TV game. The muffled shouting shot straight through me, straight to the wall mark at home. For a second, I understood how our hallway must sound from outside. Just noise, crashes, fragments of words that never tell the whole story. I sat on the edge of the bed and forced myself still. Hands flat on my thighs, jaw clenched, eyes on the door frame. I realized that if I ever slipped like that in front of a caseworker, I was finished. I wasn't only fighting my stepson's lie now, I was wrestling my own anger. I broke the no-contact rule by opening his profile that night. Technically, it was public, so nobody could call it direct communication. Still, my hands trembled on the motel phone like I was stealing. I knew my lawyer would tear into me if he saw this. The kid had updated his bio since everything exploded back home. He dropped one vague quote about toxic people and protecting your peace. Underneath, a couple of friends commented little fire emojis and applause. Reading it, I realized I had become his villain in neon letters. I scrolled deeper through jokes and memes and clips about crazy step-parents. Every video about abusive households had a like from his account. Maybe that was just algorithm junk, maybe he truly believed his own story. Either way, it told me exactly how he wanted everyone else to see me. Buried in his tagged posts, I spotted an old screenshot my wife once forwarded. Back then I skimmed it and shrugged it off as teenage complaining. Now I enlarged it, zoomed in tight, and read every line slowly. A group chat, 3 usernames, my stepson and 2 kids from his grade. One friend wrote, "Just move out dude, get away from him." My stepson answered, "He's not my real anything, I just have to survive." The next message punched harder because I missed it the first time. "If it gets bad, I'll tell school he grabbed me, they'll believe me." I stared at that sentence until my eyes watered from the screen. He posted it months before anyone came to our door with forms. No bruises then, no interviews then, just a kid planning an exit. I saved the image straight away, fingers clumsy on the download button. A new message from my wife popped up while I still watched the chat. "Neighbor just texted me, she wants to show us something from her camera." I felt my heart pick up speed in a way that was not healthy. Anything with the word camera had become either a weapon or a rescue. We met in the neighbor's driveway like people dealing a secret. She held her phone in both hands, nervous but strangely determined. My wife stood between us, eyes swollen, not sure where to look. I kept my arms folded tight, more to stop shaking than to posture. The neighbor opened her doorbell app and pulled up a clip from that night. "Something about this bugged me after the officers left," she murmured, glancing around. She hit play and there was our front patch of lawn and walkway. Nothing dramatic at first, just my stepson outside near the bushes alone. He checked over both shoulders, slow, like he wanted to be sure. Then he turned toward the house and walked straight to the side wall. We couldn't see the exact spot inside, but I knew that angle instantly. He drew back his fist and hammered the siding 3 times in a row. On the screen, his whole body jerked with each swing, no hesitation at all. After the last blow, he rotated his shoulder and rolled his head once. He winced on purpose, dropped his arm, and then stared at the camera lens. Not scared, not hurt, just calculating, with a tiny curl at one corner. My wife inhaled sharply and covered her mouth like she had been slapped. The neighbor's thumb hovered over the pause icon, afraid to press anything else. I leaned closer until my forehead almost touched the glass of the phone. There he was, the boy who claimed I threw him, rehearsing his bruise. "There's more," the neighbor whispered and rewound a few seconds before the swings. Before he hit the wall, he tested one light tap, checking how it sounded. He adjusted his stance, squared up like he was practicing for a punch bag. He knew exactly what he needed that mark to look like later. I could hear my pulse in my ears over the tinny clip audio. The kid stepped back from the wall, flexed his fingers, then cradled his shoulder. He grimaced once, made sure his face pointed toward the lens, then relaxed again. That was the moment my anger shifted from defensive to something colder. My wife finally lowered her hand and turned toward me, eyes huge and unfocused. "You didn't do this," she breathed like the video had just granted permission. It hurt that she needed a pixelated clip before she believed her own partner. I swallowed the reply that wanted to jump out and ruin everything. "We need to send this to the lawyer right now," I said, keeping my volume low. The neighbor nodded fast, relief mixing with fear in her quick movements. She forwarded the file to both of us with shaky glances toward her window. No one wants their camera to be the star witness in a family meltdown. Back in my car, I watched the clip again before even turning the key. Each replay dug the truth in deeper, erased one more doubt about intent. This was not confusion, not overreaction, not a misunderstood grab in an argument. This was choreography, and my stepson had directed the whole scene by himself. I drove to the motel and called my attorney before leaving the parking spot. He picked up on the second ring, voice clipped like, "Always ready for bad news." "I have something you need to see," I told him, and my throat tightened. For once, I heard a hint of urgency in his usually steady tone. An hour later, we were crowded around his monitor in that upstairs office. He imported the clip, scrubbed through frame by frame, leaning close in total focus. When my stepson turned toward the camera with that smug little half-smile, he paused. "That expression alone," he muttered, "is going to bother a lot of people." I showed him the screenshot from the group chat right after the video. He read the line about telling school. I grabbed him if necessary. His jaw clenched once, then relaxed as he tapped the desk with his knuckles. "This is premeditation," he said quietly, not triumphantly, more like exhausted confirmation. He printed both images, the paused frame and the chat screenshot together. "These go to the investigator, to the social worker, to the prosecutor," he listed. "Nobody gets to say this was a misunderstanding anymore after seeing this sequence." Part of me wanted to cheer, part of me wanted to throw up. "Do not contact the kid even now," he warned, eyes locking onto mine. "I know you want answers, or maybe an apology, or maybe to scream. If you reach out, they will twist it into intimidation faster than you think." He knew me too well already, because that urge burned under my ribs. On the way back to the motel, my wife called for the first real conversation. Her voice cracked as soon as I answered, like she had been holding it together too long. "I watched it again after you left," she said, words rushing over each other. "I don't know how I missed who he was turning into. I almost threw out something cruel about her taking his side from the start. Instead, I forced calm, remembered the attorney's warning about my temper and tone. "We have proof now," I answered, slow, careful, like walking on thin ice. "Next step is making sure the right people actually care about the truth." She told me the caseworker scheduled another meeting for later that week. This time the attorney could attend, which changed the whole balance in the room. "Bring the video," she whispered, as if someone else might be listening at home. Hearing that, I realized she was scared of our own child for the first time. That night at the motel, I lined up the documents on the small table. Printed screenshots, still frames from the doorbell feed, my own notes scribbled everywhere. It looked like a crime board from some low-budget show, only mine was real. What gnawed at me most was not whether I would clear my name, but what this proof said about the kid I had tried to raise. The investigator tapped the laptop trackpad and brought up my stepson's clip. Conference room door shut, chairs scraping, everyone settling like this was a trial. My attorney sat beside me, shoulders relaxed, eyes locked on the screen. Across the table, my wife twisted her ring while our kid slouched in his seat. "Watch carefully," the investigator said, turning the laptop so everyone had a view. Time stamp in the corner, front walk in frame, nobody else around him. We all leaned in as my stepson checked both sides like he was alone. My chest tightened because I knew exactly what came next in that replay. On screen, he moved to the side of the house and squared up. 3 heavy blows into the wall, deliberate and full force, zero hesitation. He winced after the last hit, rotated his shoulder, then stared straight ahead. The image froze on that smug little half grin I could never forget now. Nobody spoke for a good 10 seconds, which felt like a full minute. The investigator finally exhaled and leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. My wife's hand slid off her ring and dropped to her lap. My stepson kept his face blank, but one foot started tapping under the table. Would you like to explain what we're seeing here? The investigator focused on him, not on me, which was new territory. Our kid shrugged once, tiny movement, eyes darting toward the door. I was just messing around, he muttered, voice flat, not even fake weak this time. Messing around with what? My attorney asked, fingers resting lightly on his notebook. You claim someone else caused that injury, he added, tone calm, almost bored. Yet here you are striking the surface yourself before any report was filed. He clicked the trackpad again, letting the hits play out on a loop. Our kid's jaw clenched as he watched his own performance repeat. I was acting out what happened, okay, he blurted, sitting forward a little. I was trying to show where he slammed me, that's all. It sounded rehearsed, like he had practiced that line in front of a mirror. The investigator stopped the video right on the frame where he smirked. You think that expression fits someone reliving trauma? He asked quietly, almost gentle. My stepson's mouth opened, closed, then twisted into a full T. In a scowl. He crossed his arms and leaned back like the conversation bored him. My attorney reached into the folder and slid out the chat screenshot. Let's add this to the picture, he said, pushing it toward the investigator. The printed messages landed between us with the ugly line in bold ink. If it gets bad, I'll tell school he grabbed me, they'll believe me. The room temperature dropped, at least for me, when that sentence hit the table. The investigator read it twice, then glanced at my stepson with a new expression. These messages are from months ago, he said, tapping the date near the top. This was written long before you reported anything to any adult. It was a joke, my stepson snapped, shoulders hunching higher, voice getting sharp. People say stuff online, it doesn't mean they're serious, you know that. He threw a quick glare at me like I had betrayed some secret code. Under the table, my wife's foot nudged his ankle, a wordless signal to stop. You joked specifically about accusing him, the investigator pressed, still controlled. Then we see footage of you manufacturing an injury, down to facial expression. Help me understand how that lines up with your earlier statement about fear. He did not raise his tone once, which somehow made it land even harder. Our kid's bravado cracked for the first time since this started. He blinked fast, eyes glassy, then wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I just wanted things different, he muttered, looking down at the table. And nobody listens unless something huge happens, so I made it huge. Hearing that hurt more than the original accusation, in a weird way. Not because it made him sympathetic, but because it was so calculated. He had weighed options and chosen nuclear, then committed without blinking. I watched this child I had driven to practice and games shrug off, detonating my life. The investigator closed the folder and folded his hands carefully. From our perspective, the evidence does not support your story of assault, he said. He turned toward me, for once addressing me as something other than a risk. We will be filing this as an unfounded report regarding your conduct. Relief washed through me and then froze halfway, because unfounded is not innocent. Unfounded just means they can't keep chasing you, not that you didn't bleed. And the boy, my attorney asked, leaning forward, eyes still sharp and focused. What happens regarding his deliberate false report and self-inflicted injury? The investigator hesitated, which told me the answer before he gave it. We're recommending mental health services and family intervention, he replied eventually. At his age, the goal is rehabilitation, not punishment if we can help it. Those words dropped between us like a rope thrown to one side only. My wife spoke for the first time since the video started looping. I can't keep him in the house right now, she whispered, voice shredded. I'm afraid he'll do something worse if he thinks things aren't going his way. It broke my heart and also confirmed every fear I'd had for weeks. The investigator nodded and jotted something quick across the top page. We can work with you on a temporary placement, he answered, sounding tired now. Grandparents, other relatives, possibly a structured program, depending on availability. Our family was now being discussed like a logistics problem to solve by Friday. After the meeting, we stepped into the hallway while my attorney wrapped final details. My wife leaned against the wall and let her head fall back. You didn't do it, she said, barely above a breath, eyes closed. Hearing the words out loud this late in the game burned and soothed at once. I needed you to say that weeks ago, I answered a little too fast. She flinched more from the truth than the tone, I think, remembering everything. I know, she replied, finally looking up, eyes rimmed, shoulders sagging. By the time I figured it out, you were already bleeding from every side. We walked out of the building together but felt miles apart. In the parking lot, she told me her parents agreed to take him in. He leaves tomorrow, she said, staring at the asphalt like it had answers. I'm packing his stuff tonight while he's at intake with the therapist. Something in me relaxed at the thought of space, then twisted with guilt. I didn't cheer that he was going, but I wasn't sad either. That's not a great feeling to admit about a kid you raised. Still, honesty here matters more than pretending I'm some saintly stepfather. Later that week, I stayed in my car across from her parents' driveway. Watched him load a couple of bags into their trunk without looking back once. He climbed in, earbuds already in, shutting out the world before the door closed. The car pulled away, and all I felt was a strange mix of relief and grief. Work called after the case was officially marked unfounded in their RICO. RDS. HR invited me to another video meeting, this time without the attorney present. They offered reinstatement with conditions, training sessions, wellness check-ins, all very polite. I listened, then asked for time to think, because walking back in would mean seeing every whisper. In the end, I negotiated a separation package and walked away from that place. It hurt, sure, but at least the final paperwork did not mention violence. Money doesn't fix being branded, even for a short while, as a danger. Still, it gave me breathing room while I tried to figure out who I was now. Months rolled by with cautious visits, supervised hangouts, carefully scheduled dinners. My wife and I learned to talk in shorter sentences, less assumption, more listening. We built rules the hard way, like never discussing him when tired or angry. Our marriage survived, but it limped for a while, and that limp still shows sometimes. The text from my stepson came on a random Tuesday night. I was half asleep on the couch when the phone lit up. Sorry for what I did, the message read, bare and messy. Below it, another line, I just wanted mom back, I didn't think it through. I stared for a long minute before typing anything in response. Part of me wanted to unload every sleepless night on his screen. Another part remembered a messed-up teenager who chose a nuclear button over talking. In the end, I picked the version of me I could live with. I'm glad you're getting help, I wrote, thumb stiff, breathing slow. What you did hurt a lot, and it changed everything for me. I won't be alone with you again, but I'm not rooting against you. I pressed send and watched the little delivered checkmark appear like a small verdict. He replied with a single I get it, then nothing else that night. I don't know if he truly understood or just wanted the exchange over. Either way, a line had been drawn that we both could see. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just a boundary carved out of what survived. So yeah, he tried to blow up my life by lying about my hands. He failed at getting me locked up, but he succeeded at something else. The man who lived on autopilot, trusting that good intentions were enough, is gone. Now, I love his mother, but I protect myself first, and that version of me is not coming back.